Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Meet Me at the Spot. I'm your host, Holly, and this week I am so excited to share my conversation with Rachael Woodard. Rachael is a bi-plus disabled cis woman and host of the brand new podcast, Abiding Hysteria. The show is a platform for uplifting the health stories of women and gender diverse people, particularly highlighting the issues of gender bias in the medical field, chronic and critical illness, and more. It also features medical professionals and their perspectives on our health systems and how we can work together to combat the many types of bias faced by patients and professionals alike. This conversation was so amazing and so much fun. I recently just learned about Rachael and the great work that she does, and I can't wait to share our conversation. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Welcome, Rachael, to the podcast. I am so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Absolutely. So we are new friends.
Yes.
And so I have spent the past few days stalking you on social media in the non-creepiest way possible and getting to know a little bit about you. But for the listeners, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're all about.
So I am, well, as I put to everybody when I'm trying to get them on my show, I'm a bi-plus disabled woman who has chronic illness, chronic pain, and I have been dealing with that for about 15 to 16 years now. And I am the host of a podcast that's brand new called Abiding Hysteria. That's a platform for women and gender diverse people to tell our health stories and to address things like gender bias in our healthcare systems. But mostly, I made it so that people like me don't feel so alone in our health struggles. And so we don't feel so alone in dealing with things like gender bias because it can be really lonely dealing with those sorts of things and struggling to find doctors who listen the first time, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That struggle is very, very real. And thinking about your podcast and the work that you do there, the first question I always like to ask my guests is really what kind of got you started in that work? I know you talked about it a little bit, but if you want to dive deeper into that, that would be awesome.
Sure. So I have really all my life been passionate about women's health and especially women's reproductive health because it's so ignored. And it's just been a thorn in my side for as long as I've been conscious of the fact that it's been ignored for so long. Especially things like finding out that medical research wasn't required in the United States for including women until the 80s, like
Mm-hmm.
in our lifetimes.
Mm-hmm.
That is ridiculous. And so things like being supportive of organizations like Planned Parenthood and other women's organizations. And now that I'm more aware as I've gotten older of gender diverse organizations, LGBT organizations that are supporting people who are essentially non-cisgender white men getting equitable health care is really important to me. And I, being LGBT myself, it has been difficult to find doctors who are understanding about that side of things too. So when you've got sort of this complex intersection, to use a buzzword there, of all of these different things that make you more difficult or complex as a patient, make it more likely that that doctor is either A, not going to listen to you, or B, not take you on as a patient. And so trying to make things as simple as possible for these practitioners can sometimes make us try to shrink ourselves and to oversimplify to the point where we try not to be a bother and try to people please with these people who are in seemingly a position of authority in our lives. So I actually, this is my second podcast. My first podcast was a rather raunchy foray into secular feminism called PSF, Promoting Secular Feminism. And I did that for a couple of years and really enjoyed it. And so this is kind of my second foray into the podcasting world. And I'm really hoping that by doing these things, we can get some positive changes out there, even if just telling our stories is all we do. Um, so that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I love that. I love that different perspective because, it's so crappy when it's because of our own personal bad experiences, right, with a system that causes us to kind of have to be advocates for our own health. Um, and then, there's some of us that take that and say, I'm also going to be an advocate for people who can't stand up and say something, who don't feel safe, in those situations. And I think what you're doing with your podcast is so powerful in that. And just allowing a space for people to share their stories is huge, because medical providers will hopefully listen to that and say, huh, what am I doing? How can I explore that within my own practice? Um, it's
Yeah, and
huge.
I think it's really important for us to realize, and this I actually learned this wording from a an ally training that I took through the Trevor Project recently, was that if we are alive, we have thoughts and we have bias. And I really think that's important to realize that, like, whether it's conscious or unconscious bias, we all have biases that we need to work on. And sometimes they're protective biases that we have, especially if we've had negative outcomes or experiences with people who have not listened to us or have been generally negative toward us. It's difficult to undo that trauma. And I
Mhm.
think it's really important that people are starting to talk about things like medical gaslighting and medical trauma and things like that so that we can sort of unpack it together and try to get to the point where we're coming at each experience and meeting people where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've brought up a lot of really good terms. And I'm hoping you can talk a little bit more about them, maybe what they look like and can show up as. So things around like medical bias or gender bias, even if you want to, get into that and around medical gaslighting and things like that. So if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit more about that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, so one study that I was just checking out earlier from the National Institutes of Health was just kind of doing like a study on studies, as it were. Um, and it was talking about how even in contemporary medical literature, there are still huge gender gaps and misogyny. And the thing is that this study pointed out that I really wanted to focus in on is that there is no standard way of measuring misogyny in a research article up to this point. And this, let's see, what year did this come out? This is 2022. So as of 2022, there was no standardized way to measure misogyny in a scientific research article. And
Wow.
so it's really difficult to measure something that you don't have a standardized measure for. And I was listening to, actually, I've been listening to a couple of podcasts on intuitive eating and that sort of thing, and how difficult it is to measure those sorts of things too. So I can't fault people for not measuring things that are so difficult to have measures for, especially when those measures require self-reporting, because self-reporting, as we know, can be very difficult to do when you are dealing with things like trauma because of reporting things from medical experiences in the past. So there's, even in contemporary research, there are huge gender gaps still. Let's see, I had some statistics pulled up from Duke Health actually that had an article by Emily Paulson in 2020 that talked about a survey in 2019 where 1 in 5 women say that they have felt that a healthcare provider has ignored or dismissed their symptoms, and 17% say they felt they've been treated differently because of their gender, compared with 14% of men feeling that theirs were ignored or dismissed, and 6% of men saying they felt they were treated differently because of their gender. So that's a huge gap. And the studies back that up, that the gender bias is there, especially when it comes to really key areas like cardiac care and pain management, especially. And we've seen that a lot in the most recent news about things like IUD insertion or colposcopies, where women are not getting any pain management for it at all. And they're being told things like, it's just a little pinch, when that's not it at all. And we're seeing, especially on short form video platforms like Instagram Reels, Facebook, YouTube, but mostly TikTok, of women like recording themselves from like the waist up while they're getting an IUD inserted and passing out because of the pain or vomiting because of the pain, and how awful it is that it has not been standardized that women feel pain and need pain management. And it's
Mm.
especially bad when you add in things like being a woman who is a person of color, a woman of color, or who is LGBTQ plus. Any additional intersections of marginalization make it more difficult to get pain management. And the studies show that to be true. And the origins of that come from sexism, racism, homophobia, those sorts of things. So it's up to us to work on our own biases, but also work on the systemic biases that we're seeing in the medical field in things like pain management so that we are all getting equitable care. And it's not just here in the US, it's worldwide. I mean,
Mhm.
the person who's going to be on my upcoming episode on August 2nd actually is coming out. She went viral on TikTok talking about her experience, and she said that she talked to people from all over the world who had similar experiences. And it's chilling to see that that's endemic around the world.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up the IUD insertion example. I was hoping you were going to because I was like, oh, yes. So, um, first of all, thank you for explaining that in such great detail. That was really, really helpful. So I always tell people about my IUD insertion experience. So I used to work for a birth control clinic, and I would, go into schools and community agencies and talk about all the birth control methods available so that people had all of the information, the correct information, not biased. I didn't work for any of the companies or anything like that. I'm gonna tell you the good, the bad, the ugly. And the way I was taught to talk about IUD insertions was that it's like a pinch, like, and a really three bad period cramps, and then you're good. And so that was what my sweet little pill taking heart believed until I got an IUD myself because I was like, I can't take the pill anymore. And I'm going in now advocating I can take that, I can get an IUD. And it wasn't. And for me, it wasn't terrible, but it was not just three period cramps and see you bye. For me, it was not fun. And for a lot of people, it's not. And pain, everyone experiences pain very differently,
Hmm.
and things like that. So I always try to remember people. But I will tell you, my IUD insertion speech changed so fast after that
Right?
experience. And then, like, working in that same birth control clinic, I was told by medical providers there that the reason why they didn't do like local anesthesia or anything like that is because it would take longer to wait for that to kick in than the actual insertion itself. And yeah, looking and
Why
I
does that matter?
yeah, I accept. I was like, yeah, it's so quick, like, and it's not like the worst, but I had never heard of my personal experience. I'd never heard of anyone who had such pain. And not to say those people didn't exist, I just never heard it. And that was probably me putting out the message like, it's fine, you guys, it's not that serious. So that the people were probably like, oh my gosh, it's not, and I'm just a big baby, right? So, and I recognize that now going, thinking back to that time, but that was one of the things, and also around like insurance, right? Like insurance covering anesthesia, does the practice, like we were a very small practice. We didn't even have um, like imaging kind of stuff. So if someone had something wrong that couldn't be seen by the provider, they would have to refer them to another provider at another location. So we didn't have like access to a lot of that stuff working in a really small clinic. And so and now I think back to it and I go, why was I just so mean? But it's a lot of it's because the messaging that I received to give to people, um, coupled with my experience being not fun, but n not the worst of the worst. Like it was manageable. Like they did give me a pill that I had to insert vaginally like a few hours beforehand to let it dissolve, and it's supposed to like kind of relax my cervix a bit. And I will tell you, when I went in, they said, "Oh, no, that pill isn't even all the way dissolved yet. But we're gonna go ahead and do this anyways."
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's not getting an IUD is not fun. Like medical procedures in general generally are not fun. But yeah, right? Like to have zero, nothing. And some people
Yeah.
being told like just take some like aspirin or whatever, a Tylenol, whatever, a few hours before you come and you'll be good to go. I'm sorry. What?
Especially when it's a colposcopy, which, for those of you who don't know, is where they actually take a scraping of the flesh of your cervix to
Mhm.
test it, which is horrifying. And I have a friend who has to get it done every year and has never had pain management with it in their life. And I'm like, my God, if a man had to do something like that, like if you had to scrape a chunk off of a man to get it tested, you know there would be pain management for that. Why don't we get it?
Well, right. I mean, and that's like that's a huge thing, right? Is that, I remember early on in some of the birth control for men, right? In a lot of the studies, they were going really well. As far as like pregnancy prevention, really high rates of success. Like this was going to be revolutionary
Mm-hmm.
stuff, but they stopped the studies, and this isn't only a one-time deal. This has happened in a couple different studies where they have stopped the studies because the participants have experienced headaches, extreme fatigue,
Mm-hmm.
mood swings, and things like that. And
Like
all of like
literally
the
any
uterus,
side effects.
yeah, the uterus having people are like, so when we take birth control, asshole, I just remember just getting like so, uh, um, so yeah, and it's frustrating, right? It's super frustrating because their pain, their side effects, their symptoms are real and they're valid and they suck. And also, how come studies and things are changed when they're experiencing it, but not when we are?
Yeah, and like just to give an idea of the severity of that whole thing, the scope of it, where like the risk is headache or a little bit of nausea or even pain. Whereas I recently found out in the last 4 or 5 years, I think, that the estrogen-based birth control that I've been taking since I was 12 years old
Hmm.
and have aura migraines put me at severe increased risk of stroke.
Yeah.
But men can't take birth control consistently, so they don't have to do it.
Yeah. So maybe we just don't talk about it because it'll be stigmatized. How are they
Hmm.
gonna talk to their other bros about birth control? It's like, are you guys kidding me?
Oh my
So
gosh, wouldn't that be so hot though?
yeah.
If
Yes.
I walked in on a conversation of men talking about how they can be responsible for birth control and like not spreading STIs and things like that, I would be just so verklempt over it. I would not be able to hold back my happiness about it.
No, those are men when we say things like, we get it, not all men. We're including you. You're not all men. Like we get you.
Yeah, it's
Good.
giving like Pedro Pascal admiring people's nails.
Yes. And I love that. Pedro Pascal can do no wrong. He better not do any wrong because I swear. Join me next week as I continue my amazing conversation with Rachel and we dive even more into talking about gender bias in the medical field. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Meet Me at the Spot. I'm your host, Holly, and this week is part two of my amazing conversation with Rachel. Make sure you go back to listen to part one so that you can understand where we're starting from for part two. Let's jump into my conversation with Rachel. I think another point that you brought up that is so important is the more intersecting identities that someone has, especially identities that have been deemed marginalized, either in the United States or globally, the more bias, the more like the higher risk for not being taken seriously and things like that. It's huge. It's so huge. We see it with celebrities, with people who have money, resources, all of this stuff,
Hmm.
right? Like it's wild to me.
Yeah, and I see it a lot when people are like downplaying other people's diagnoses and their experiences with dealing with whatever health problem it is that they're dealing with. But also, it's super important to recognize the opposite side of the coin. It's not just important that we recognize where we're marginalized, but also where we have privilege and positive bias toward us. And one study that I was looking at recently was talking about how there is bias toward beautiful people being healthier, regardless of whether they're healthy or not. So, like younger, prettier people are more likely to hear things like, oh, but you're so young. And it really hurts to hear that at some point because, I would much prefer to be young and healthy and doing things like, starting a successful career and starting a family and stuff like that instead of being constantly in pain. But, that's not how life shook out for me.
Right. And maybe I don't need that like backhanded compliment, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
not a compliment, Doc, but
Yeah, no thanks.
yeah, and it's wild because in that moment, I will speak for myself. I won't speak for a lot of people, but I always feel like if I experience something, maybe other people do too. But I know when I go to the doctor, right? Like my chart literally says I work for the medical system in which I also seek care, right? And so people assume they don't really have to break things down for me all the time because I get
Mm-hmm.
it. And I feel like I have multiple degrees, college degrees and stuff. I have a bunch of fancy letters after my name. So, therefore, if I ask questions, I'm going to be perceived as not smart, not educated.
Mm.
And so it's kind of like that double-edged sword. And um, oftentimes I feel like when I hear something from a provider that kind of shocks me or makes me go, "Wait, what did you just say?" I freeze in that moment. I absolutely freeze. I want so badly to be the person that's like, "Can we talk about what you just said?" But I'm not. I will leave that office and on the way home call my mom crying. Like, I can't believe this doctor just said this about me. Oh my God. Like, I'm getting a new doctor. That's it. I'm finding a new doctor. Um, which
Yeah.
which I have. And I'm fortunate to be able to switch providers when I've had a provider not align anymore with my values when it comes to my healthcare. So, um, but yeah, it's just like it's in that moment you're just like, wait, what? I'm sorry, what?
Yeah. They can say some wild stuff too. One uh one thing that I've had where I freeze up is when somebody I'm seeing for the first time asks me what my symptoms are. And I'm like, oh boy. First of all, my brain has to actually go, wait, what's a symptom?
Mm-hmm.
I get like the what's a football from Christmas Story thing in my brain. Like, yeah, sure, whatever. Symptoms, I have those. But then I go, they're multitudinous. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you have enough time to talk about all of the symptoms that I have right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I have to pick and choose which ones might be applicable to you at the time. And that can be difficult because some symptoms that I don't think are applicable are probably applicable.
Mm. Which symptoms are deemed worthy of getting care to
Yeah.
manage those symptoms or to figure out what's maybe causing those symptoms if that's something, you're hoping to get out of this appointment, right? Especially when you get a new provider too. Like, so my doctor's office is really cool, but they have medical residents, right? And so
Hmm.
every 3 years they rotate.
Yeah.
So, which it's fine. I get it. It's cool. It's fine. They're learning. They're babies. They're learning. And I love that for them. And I get comfortable with a provider and then I have to switch to a new provider.
Yeah.
And so
Oof.
that's the really crappy part. But that's when I started getting care and it was like still height of the pandemic. And they were the only place around me within like 100-mile radius, even taking
Hmm.
new patients.
Yeah.
The one that was closest to me was like, yeah, we're taking new patients. The first appointment we have available is in January, and this was in August. And I was like, no,
Yeah. No,
it's
thank you.
not taking new patients, babe.
Mm-mm.
I hate to tell you that. That's totally inappropriate. And especially, being someone for the past few years who has dealt with really bad chronic pain in my back, have the waiting, right? The
Hmm.
waiting, the being told, just do this. And I know I'm fortunate. I have not had a provider go, your symptoms would be better if you just lost some weight.
Oh
I
boy,
had that.
have I? Have
Yeah.
I ever?
Oh, that's so crappy. That's so horrible. Like,
Yeah.
what? What?
I know I that actually recently happened to me because I went
Mhm.
to a gastroenterologist who was amazing. She was great and she was working on some abdominal pain that I'd had like on and off for about a year and a half. We did all these tests and nothing came up and we were like trying to figure out what was going on, but then she found something else that maybe needed to be addressed and then she went on maternity leave. And I got stuck with a guy who was like, "Yeah, you're fat." And I'm like, "Hmm, no kidding. I haven't heard that before in my whole life. Might that be the problem? Or might it be that you're just out of ideas?"
I just learned recently that you can say no to being weighed in at your doctor's appointment. I didn't know
Yeah.
that was an option. My provider now, they say, first of all, they don't even 90% of the time I go there, they don't even ask me to get on the scale. And when they do, they're like, "Do you want to get weighed today? It's totally your choice." And for me, I'm like, "Sure, why not?" Because for me, it doesn't bother me. I know about what I weigh. I know I'm fat. I know, like, I know these things about me. So it's not, to me, anything terrible. But I do recognize that a lot of people have negative experiences where a doctor will read a number on a computer screen and just use that as the default. Like, if you just lost some weight, yeah, thanks, buddy. Thank you. But I can't walk and I can't stand for more than like 3 minutes at a time. So I'm not sure how you want me to just increase my physical activity, bro.
Yeah,
Like,
and it's also like if you're coming in for something like an eating disorder, how
right.
harmful is it to have somebody constantly weighing you every time you're coming in for help when that's your sole focus of the problem that you're dealing with is the number on the scale?
Yeah. Yeah.
So how much harm is it doing versus how much is it actually helping to do that every time?
Right. And the amount of people who have bad experiences in the medical world and the systems who then don't get care,
Yeah.
delay care until things are so, so bad. Myself
Hmm.
included. I've done it and I work for a medical system and I do it. I've done it with providers who have been not so kind. And I don't want to go see them. And then it gets so bad, I need to see somebody about something, right?
Yeah.
Like that's horrible. That's so bad.
And it's bad
And
enough facing problems like not being able to afford the care that you're trying to get. But then when you finally can afford it, being embarrassed that you've let it go on for so long without treating it because you've had to save up in order to be able to treat it. And then finding out that you have to get another lab or another scan or something like that that you can't afford. It's heartbreaking.
yeah. Oh, yeah. We could do 3 episodes, Rachel, you and I, about how we're going to dismantle the entire healthcare system. I feel like we can do it.
I the more that I talk about this stuff, the more radicalized I get.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Because I'm like, what? If you learned like how like the US healthcare system operates, first of all, it would just make you dizzy looking at that. And it's designed that way on purpose to make you dizzy so you don't become invested on how the ways to break into this and dismantle some of this going on, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's not just about having doctors who are insensitive to your gender, to your sexuality, to your weight, to who you are, to any of these things, to your race and ethnicity. If we got rid of all those doctors, the healthcare system would still be a problem.
Oh,
It
yeah.
would
I
be
mean,
problematic.
that's the thing is that while the barriers to care right now may not be on purpose or conscious, they were at some point, and they'll continue to be until we dismantle them. As a person who has sold insurance and been licensed in that area,
Mm.
it's awful.
Hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a whole other part. You notice I didn't even touch that part of things about the insurance part. I'm like, we're
Oh,
not gonna
yeah.
talk about that.
That could be a whole podcast on its own. And trust
Oh
me,
yeah.
you don't want me going on a rant down that road.
All right. I want to take us to a happy place.
Mm,
Because that's
yes.
what I like to do. Um, I want to put an imaginative scenario for you. If you could build a workshop, build a training, build a system, whatever it is, however it looks like to you, that really works to dismantle some of these biases in healthcare system, what are some like key parts that you would include in that?
Hmm. Probably start with the spectrum of gender
Mm,
and the spectrum of sex and how biologically there's no such thing as two sexes, and just start from that basic standpoint of like things are so much more complex than you ever imagined them to be, and biology is so much more complex. It's one of those fields where when you ask a question, the first answer out of an expert's mouth is going to be, well, that depends.
hmm.
And I think it's super important to understand that things are so much more complex, but also so much more beautiful than we've given them credit for, and that binaries don't really serve us anymore. And by understanding each other and the nuances of each other, I think we reveal that there's so much more out there to discover. And I think that would do things like stir up interest in research that is different from what we've experienced so far, that is outside of our societal expectations, which could bring us so much more valuable information than just the things that are like, well, male, female. So
Hmm.
just starting from dismantling the idea that there are two sexes or there are only two genders, I think would be a great beginning. But also talking about things, you know, that there are not concepts of race in biology. I mean, there are concepts of like differences in bones or differences in skin, but races, nationalities don't exist in biology. So, all of these constructs that we've put together, we need to understand them in a framework from the biological standpoint and the complexity of it rather than focusing on like, okay, this person is this, and this category. That is the societal expectation of what they're going to be based on the things that we've labeled them. I think it's much more important to go, okay, this person's like, say this person's bone structure does this, or this person's DNA may say this. So, how can we understand that from the perspective of this person's biology is what we need to base this care on, not this person's constructed background of what we decided it is. just taking it apart bit by bit and going, find the interesting, nuanced parts of it instead of focusing on the labels that may or may not be helpful.
I'm really glad that you brought it up in that way. I have for a long time said the way we kind of categorize people into these like boxes is lazy on a data analyzing side. I get that it may make somebody's job easier or computer applications job easier, but we miss the bigger picture when we do that, and we do a huge disservice to clients, to customers, and to humans, right? And to all of us at the end of the day. We do a huge disservice. So I think that's such a great place to start. It seems like, duh. Like to me, right? I'm like, oh yeah, duh, that's where you would start. But then it really opens up the conversation for everything else, right? Beyond that, once you kind of get past those little hangups, and I call them little hangups, but they're big hangups for a lot for a lot of systems, right?
One thing that I would talk about if I had to start really, really small, though, is how to advocate for yourself as a patient
Mm.
and using the different facets of you as a person, the intersections of the things that make it difficult for a practitioner to understand you as a person and as a patient. And then saying, okay, flipping that on its head and saying, practitioners, you need to be taking this course too, so that you can understand where these people are coming from. And I think there is a lot of that happening already. There are great new resources for those things because of technology. So, one resource that I found out about recently are podcasts that can be used as part of your continuing education credits that all medical professionals have to take every year to keep their licensure. And I thought it was so cool that podcasts are a part of that now. And the person who I had on my first episode was the chief medical officer of the South Atlantic region Planned Parenthood. And she
Yeah.
was talking about how a lot of those are starting to deal with undoing the harm of bias in the medical field. And I think that's super cool that it's already getting out there, but it's up to us to keep pushing and to make sure that we're advocating for ourselves in the office, but also on the streets.
I've seen a lot of like medical systems and offices and things like that have their own podcast, and I think that's really great. It's such a great platform to have more honest conversations and not so clinical-ish,
Hmm.
more real conversations. You are just a wealth of knowledge and amazing thoughts. Like I honestly could just listen to you talk about this all day. So this breaks my heart when we get to this time. Uh, but I always like to ask my guests before we part if there's any wisdom or advice that you would like to give to the listeners.
Tagline for my podcast, every episode, is the following. And I think that it is probably the most important thing that I say on my show, but also that I say in general. And that is, when it comes to your health, you deserve to be heard, understood, but most of all, believed.
That is amazing. And such a great way to encompass our entire conversation. Rachel, thank you so much. Thank you
Thank
so much for
you.
that. You're incredible, and your podcast is incredible. The whole concept is amazing, and I'm so glad we found one another, and now we're best friends forever because that's how adults.
Yes.
That's why I
Yep,
have a
you're part of my family now. You can't
yes,
get out of it.
yes, obviously. Well, thank you again so much. I appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. This has been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Another huge thank you to Rachel for sharing your knowledge and experience with all of the listeners. I truly learned so much and had a really great time getting to learn more about the work that you do. So thank you again so much.